We're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Jaden Lawrence. I'll be your moderator for today. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. To begin, we have Dr. Suzanne Leonard. She is a assistant professor and extension specialist in the Department of Animal Science at North Carolina State University. Her work focuses on developing and utilizing technologies, sensors, and data to optimize livestock housing and production with a focus on environmental control for swine. So I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, and then please save your questions for the end for her. Thank you.
Is it all right if I pull this out?
Okay.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to our afternoon session on technologies. And when we talk about technologies in the swine barn, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. My clicker does not work. A great example of technology. So when we think about all the technologies and all the things that it can be used to accomplish in our barns, we sometimes think really pie in the sky of robots taking care of the pigs, but really a swine barn technology can be anything that you use to make your life a little bit easier. So there are a lot of things that technologies can do inside of our facilities to help us with our day-to-day management and necessary tasks. We know that technologies can be used to give us more precise management, not just at the barn level or the pen level, but even potentially down to the individual animal. We're doing more EID tags, individual identification, so that way we can better meet the needs of each individual pig and get the best outcomes for all of our animals. We also know that our technologies can be used to improve the way our humans interact with the farm and the animals themselves. If we can delegate the boring, less exciting, mundane tasks that those producers don't like to do to a technology, then that frees up more time for our humans to put their eyeballs on the animals and be working with those individually to do the things that our technologies can't quite yet capture. We also know that technology can be used to improve sustainability. If we are more precise with our input resources, then we can improve our margins and therefore reduce our carbon footprint and so forth. Further technologies with that improved precision can reduce our production costs, improve our margins that we heard a lot about this morning. And technologies can be plug and play. And by this, I mean that you can unbox a piece of technology, plug it in, and there are some that truly just right out of the box you can plug in and they are good to go, ready to rock and roll. However, technologies cannot be fully autonomous, perfectly accurate, and maintenance-free forever. At some point, even with that plug-and-play technology, you're going to have to attend to it and make sure that it's still functioning properly. Technologies are not going to fully replace our human caretakers, and I personally don't believe that they should. There's still some things that our humans just do better. And so we're not trying to replace them, but augment what those jobs look like to make our human caretakers more effective and efficient overall. We also cannot overcome poor husbandry and bad management with technologies. If you are the worst farm in the world, you can put in all the cameras and sensors, but if your people aren't doing what they need to be doing and using good husbandry and animal handling strategies, you can't overcome that with a simple technology. And moreover, this is the comforting and frustrating thing about technology, that they cannot differ from what we tell them to do. This is good in that robots are probably not going to take over the world yet, but it's bad in that you can tell a human to go do a task, but if they need to get apart, add some things together, oftentimes your human can put those pieces together, but the technology is going to be fairly dedicated and do what you told it to do explicitly without doing some of those digital inferencing steps that sometimes our human workers do. So if you're thinking about buying a technology for your swine farm, where is the best place for you to make that investment? The first and most important question is to buy a technology that actually solves a problem you really have. There are tons of cool party trick technologies out there, all sorts of gadgets and whizmos that can do really interesting and neat things, but if it's not actually helping you in what you need to do to get through the day, then it's probably not the right technology or time for you to buy that specific technology. You also want to make sure that the technology you purchase aligns with your current and future goals. Maybe you're thinking 5 steps down the road, some of that generational planning, what you would like your production system to look at and look towards, and maybe you're not quite there, but maybe this technology could be that stopgap to help you get there. any technology that you're looking at, that salesman is going to probably provide you with some company-based data of how effective it is, how well it works. You're really wanting to look for technologies that have some part of third-party evaluation. They're backed up by hard data, and if this can be from a third-party collaborator, a university, or extension personnel such as myself, other producers that you know that have these technologies. Anytime you can get some boots on the ground people that have no skin in the game and aren't directly from the company trying to sell you the technology is really going to help you make the most informed choice and make sure that that technology functions as it's promised. And then, of course, at the end of the day, your technology, this investment, it's going to cost you money. So you want to be sure that at the end, you're going to get some value back from that piece of equipment. So how do we evaluate the value of a technology? Well, you have to consider the costs and the benefits, like any good business person. Your costs are going to be pretty straightforward. You're going to have to pay some fee in order to buy that hardware, buy that software initially. Oftentimes with software, you may have a continued cost of an annual subscription. Some of them are based on a couple cents per head per pig as you go throughout the cycles, updates. You're going to have to maintain and replace that equipment. Even if you put it in a really nice place and take really good care, don't ever pressure wash it, because I know we've all never pressure washed something we shouldn't. But even if you take really good care of it, eventually it's going to become outdated and you're going to have to invest to maintain it. And then it's also going to cost you and your people time in order to learn that technology. Whether it be software or hardware, there's still a learning curve and time and frustration associated with that. So you want to be sure you're factoring that in when you think about total purchase costs. Now on the flip side, we do have a lot of benefits provided by these technologies by reducing our inputs into our production system or increasing or decreasing whatever that output may be, our target. Can be great ways to improve our overall margins of our production systems and therefore increase our profits. By getting improved pig productivity, those are very obvious gains on the financial side of things. But if we're improving our health or animal welfare, those also have benefits associated with them that may not necessarily be a dollar amount, depending on how you're structured. But there may still be an extra benefit from improving your animal welfare or even worker morale. These technologies, after you learn how to use them, ideally are going to save you time in one way or another, different ways that you can approach these problems, and of course, reduce the frustration and increase your job satisfaction at the end of the day for you and your people, so that way we can keep our barns nice, happy places to work. All right, so we're going to have some photos later on. I'm from the government. I have to throw out my disclaimer here, and that these are not an explicit endorsement to the exclusion of any other products. These are just some nice Google photos and some products we use in our research. So some specific technologies for swine. When we think about how to pick these out, the first is to select equipment that is specifically designed for outdoor use, pig use, or general livestock or poultry use. We know that our environments in our barns are pretty challenging for a piece of technology that's not designed for it. We started off multiple projects trying with different boxes to use indoor use or office use sensors, and at the end of the day, you're going to be money ahead if you just buy the really expensive pig designed products. Know your expected ranges or the desired limits that you want to know, especially if you're thinking about indoor environment and air quality monitoring. If you just know that you want to keep your ammonia below a certain threshold, then maybe you only need a sensor that goes up to that 30 ppm. Maybe you don't need the full 100 ppm range and can save some money on that front. And then my last point is that connectivity is a really sexy and exciting idea. The ability to lay on your couch and see how all your barns are doing is really beautiful. But in practice, it often looks like this bottom photo with a lot of extension cords and zip ties and duct tape. So it can be done, but where we're at in North Carolina, we have a lot of trees, a lot of hills. So a little bit more challenging, but it can be done if you're willing to compromise and maybe not have the most beautiful solution, but it can be done. When it comes to environmental management and technologies for that, there are a lot of sensors on the market for continuously monitoring relative humidity and gas concentrations such as CO2 and ammonia, H2S. A lot of these can be configured directly into your ventilation controllers or whatever other ventilation management devices you have in your barns. And oftentimes with these, you're going to want to have some type of automating, recording, and alerts. It's really nice to be able to track and see where your levels are, but it's even better if you can proactively respond in real time before you turn into a less desirable or dangerous condition inside your barn. But with these sensors, they often have a limited lifespan and a higher purchase cost on the electrochemical gas sensors specifically. These operate by doing pulling in an air sample, doing a small reaction in order to assess that gas level, and then they have to revert back in order to take another sample and continuously get you that information. So your lifespan is going to be a little more limited on those, so keep in mind that additional maintenance and continued purchasing costs with those. Some of these gas sensors also will self-calibrate, or within a certain time period, they need to do a fresh air purge, whether that be a continuous line or carried outside. So keep that in mind as well, just depending on how that aligns with your own maintenance and technical expertise. Of course, the biggest challenge that we have with sensors in the barn is pressure washing. These are often made so that you can really quickly unscrew them, take them out of the barns before you wash, but you have to remember to go in and unscrew them and take them out of the barns. So can be a challenge. Most of them are not designed to stay inside the facility whenever you're doing that cleanup and disinfection. And with these gas sensors, you do want to have them as close to pig level as possible so you get the most representative conditions. But of course, if you're at pig level, as that pig grows, that becomes more of a challenge. So in our finishing studies, we found that 38 inches above the floor is a pretty magical number, and we haven't had any chew them off at there. At 36, you're gonna lose a few, but at 38 inches, that's been our magic. Another interesting technology for a lot of barns are a water meter. This is a pretty straightforward device, right? You just put it in your water line and it measures how much water is going through there. If you can do one of these per each barn, that's great. Per room or per line is even better. We still are, a lot of us, on well water, so you do have outages, pump issues, things like that. And so having a simple pulse water meter on there can help you identify when you have an outage, or potentially when that increase changes due to disease presence, diarrhea, or heat stress challenges. Tracking your water consumption across multiple cycles gives you the ability to compare different groups, genetics, feed, management changes that you're making. And we all know that feed and water consumption are tied pretty closely together. And water is another big efficiency metric when we look at our production systems. A lot of these are offering real-time connectivity and self-reporting, whether that be tied into a controller or to a remote or cellular monitoring system. So that way you can lay on your couch and check your water consumption. But oftentimes you may have issues with these water meters getting clogged or corroded over time if you have hard water, soft water, iron deposits. Some particular minerals can make it a little more challenging. So just do a water quality test before you start trying to implement these within your barns. Tying onto our water is feed monitoring. So oftentimes these systems are going to be attached directly to your bins in order to estimate how much feed is left inside there. And some of these work continuously. Some of them are, send in requests and it'll tell you when they are. Others do once a day or once an hour or something like that to give you an estimate of how much food is left on that farm or bin. The sensor types all vary depending on the particular system. A lot of them are sonar, laser, light beams, different things like that in order to estimate what the height is or the volume is of your feed remaining in your bin. But the power requirements are going to vary based on how frequently you're taking those measurements and what type of sensor it is. Some of them are hardwired in, and then others are battery powered. Oftentimes you can integrate these systems directly with your feed mill. That's really the key advantage, in that whoever's delivering your feed can also see your feed levels, not just you, so that way they can better coordinate their processes amongst multiple places. But at minimum, you at least know what's in there with a little more accuracy than just doing the rock test. And this is some auditing that we did on some commercial farms. We audited 46 barns across 5 different sites. And this is just from a one-time visit. We found that about 1% of these sites were out of feed in week 1 and almost 5% in week 17 in that wean to finish cycle. So these feed outages still happen, and these were really well-managed farms, but you're still having feed outages and issues in the real world. And so I think the ability to remotely monitor a bin is a pretty simple, straightforward technology that can give you a little more peace of mind. The cornerstone technology in the swine industry is the electronic sow feeder, ESF, sow station. These are all going to be RFID based these days, with a electronic tag goes in the ear, identifies that animal when she or he goes in, and that way you can get that individual animal feed intake, pig specific diets, portion curves, prescribed specific diets, even with new Just-All feeders, blend diets right there at the feeder based on who that sow is. Really exciting stuff to get down to truly the individual pig level. So this is the way that we can get that true, precise data. A lot of good information, and just keep good tabs on every animal in that pen to make sure that they're all eating. And a lot of these also will offer the weigh scale underneath, so that way you can get that pig's weight every time they come in to eat, so that way you get feed conversion efficiency data as well. In our group, we have worked with some of these ESF feeders on commercial farms. And of course, it's a real life system in a real life farm. So you're going to get some inherently noisy data. And the pigs themselves, their growth curve is not a nice, beautiful. It kind of goes up and down throughout the finishing period. So with that inherently noisy data, you're going to have some kind of filtering. Sometimes the software systems for these systems will help kind of smooth that out for you or help you do some anomaly detection. And maintaining the calibration of your feed and your pig scale is also pretty important. For our research projects, we had to do it about weekly to get the precision that we wanted, but under their commercial conditions, they were doing it about monthly. But that means you have to have someone on farm who can do those things, keep your calibration weights in order to make sure the data you're getting back is reliable, because it does you no good to have a pig weight if you're not confident that that's the pig's actual weight. As with anything that you're going to put a tag on, you're going to have some tags get lost. I think we run about 1% to 3% on our RFID tag trials. And there can be some behavioral challenges with training the pigs and bullies or resource guarding, but ESF feeders have been around for a really long time. So I think we have those pretty well ironed out as long as you have good training going in to when your pigs are going in this group. One of the most approachable technologies for swine production is records management software. As we move away from pen and paper to an electronic entry, this gives us the chance to be more reactive to data as it's happening. Rather than calling in your deads once a week on the phone, if you can enter them in real time, then your veterinarian can track and see how your production's going and respond much more quickly than just at the end of the turn once something has already happened or that disease challenge has already been very detrimental. Most of these use direct electronic entry, which can be a really good thing in that you don't have all these pieces of paper floating around and getting afterbirth and et cetera on them. But on the other side, that means that you're gonna have to carry around a tablet or have some piece of electronic equipment into the barn at all times. And most of these are collecting health, production, husbandry information, anything you'd write down on a sow card or a feed receipt card in order to just track all your daily information and how your pigs are doing. Now, these records management software are going to have some place to store that datage. Sometimes that will be locally, whether that be on a PC in the barn, you can store it on a hard drive, thumb drive, etc. But think about when you're purchasing these, how long is that data going to be available, and how big is that data going to be over time? Sometimes it's stored remotely or on a cloud service by the third-party software companies. There are different user levels inside these technologies, so you can set some people that can just see your data, others can actually go in and edit, and then still a third level of an owner where you can go in, edit, make changes. And this can be a big advantage if you want to just show people your data versus actually give them the ability to edit. Oftentimes you may need simultaneous users. For example, on a sow farm, if you have multiple people working, you're going to need multiple users, and sometimes that comes with an increased cost of how many users you have of the software versus having one person at a time using it and not having real-time update. However, the potential for this incorrect entry does increase whenever you're talking about farm staff sometimes, because when you're out in the barns and you're hot and you're sweaty, if you write it down wrong on a piece of paper, that's still a chance that you can have with an electronic entry as well. Easy to click the wrong button or push the wrong thing. We have an electronic entry system on our own farm, and we get a few zombie pigs that are marked as dead, but you're sitting there looking at them sometimes. So it's important to keep in mind that it's not going to solve all of your problems, but having that direct entry can help with some of the lost sheets of paper. Another emerging technology, and exciting one I think, is the weight estimation camera. So these are all going to do some type of 3D scanning of the pigs. And there's a lot of different angles and viewpoints, but the most common of these are good to get that nice top-down view of the top of the pig, and then it will separate pig from background, and then just do a volume estimation based on how large that pig is, and then correlate that with weight. Some of these incorporate genetic information so that way you can get a little bit more detailed, dial in those estimations based on the specific genetic lines that you're running, but not always. Oftentimes, these will be stationary cameras that are mounted above a pen, usually over top of the feeder or the drinker, so those pigs can be in a more stationary or consistent positioning. And oftentimes they are looking more towards the market weight end. Some of them will estimate the weight all the way through the growth cycle, and then some of them are really just focused on that last month or so of finishing. Usually these don't provide any individual pig identification. So the weight estimates that you're getting back are going to be either an average weight for the whole pen, or some of them will tell you how many pigs in that pen they think are above the market weight, or above whatever target you set and tell. But again, most of these don't provide that individual identification, so then it's still up to the human to go in and pick out the specific pigs that are at your target weight. There is a handheld option on the market, the OptiScan, and this comes with a little harness and tablet system that you put in front of you, so you can, in theory, go into the pen or stand in the alleyway, reach your little scanner over, and then just take a pig photo from wherever you are, and then get the weight of that individual animal as you're doing it. The hype videos that they have on their website are awesome. They are very quick and efficient, can do it in about 10 seconds. In field studies that we have been involved with, it takes more like about 3 minutes. So there's definitely a learning curve there, perhaps on our part, to get the OptiScan to actually get you that reliable estimation in a good point. But you have the individual animal identification, and you know exactly how much this pig weighs, and so then, you know, it's a pro and con, a give and take. So, and the people and the technologies are always evolving and getting better. Most of these technologies state about a 2 to 5% accuracy. So that's going to be about 5 to 13 pounds on a 275-pound pig. So yeah, sometimes that's better than I can do for sure, but some of your markers may be better than that. Another really interesting pen level camera technology is looking at activity and behavior. We had the gentleman from PIC this morning talking about their proprietary software, and there is actually a commercially available product to look at pen level activity. So this is out by Circuitech, and it does pose estimation on each of these pigs. So you can see the dots where it identifies their nose, their ears, their feet, and then their back. And then based on where those body positions are and how they move, it gives you a count of how many pigs are active, inactive, feeding, or drinking. And they actually just rolled out this month an aggression monitor as well to count and monitor aggressive interactions, specifically targeting tail biting. So this software will give you a behavior summary of every minute, how many pigs are doing each of those, and it will actually give you up to 30 frames per second. So you can get even more resolution than that, but you know, they're not doing a whole lot of changing in a second. And it will be used to count pigs within the pen, so you have an idea of how many live animal inventory you have. And what I like about this product is it's just a software, and they are compatible with most RGB or CCTV cameras that you can just go out and buy. So if you have a camera for another purpose, then you could potentially use it just as an add-on. So we are testing this software at NC State, doing some validation with it, and this is sample data that we get. So in our pen, we only have 7 pigs, but you can kind of see how as the minute of the day changes, the number of pigs that are inactive versus moving, eating, and drinking changes throughout that period too. So they're making assumptions about the behavior based on the pig's location, so this can sometimes be misleading. One of the things that we've seen in our validation is we have one pig in a particular pen that really liked to lick the sticker on the feeder, and he often got marked as feeding even though he was just at the feeder moving his head. So it's an assumption, it's a decent assumption, but not quite spot on with what our human observer said. And it does give you individual pig tracking, but unless you have real-time RFID readers on those pigs, on your feeders or your drinkers, then it's not going to be able to track individual pig behavior over time. A really great tool in the technology toolbox is the thermal camera. So these can be used to measure surface temperatures within your barns, and these are really useful for checking microclimate areas and farrowing. If you have mats especially, and then with the heat lamps, always good to go through and check that you have the right wattage, the right heat lamp height. But you want to be sure and aware of heat reflections, and anytime you have metal, you're going to have some sort of heat ghosts on there. You can see the heat lamp pointed onto the mat, but on our metal divider there, we have a heated sort of ghost area. And I also want to point out with thermal cameras, you usually are not going to be able to point your cameras at pigs and detect the one with a fever. So thermal camera accuracies in general are going to be around 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and oftentimes with our sick pigs, our error or determination of febrile state is going to be much tighter than that. So by and large, you can't just take one photo of a pen of pigs and figure out who has a fever. You're going to have to do some more continuous monitoring in those situations. Thermal cameras can also be really useful around your facilities to identify cold spots. If you have leaks, missing insulation's pretty easy to find in the summertime, especially by pointing your thermal camera at your walls. You can see from our ceiling over there, our hot spot coming in during the colder inside area, and then on the other side, some inverse a wall looking at that in winter when you have the colder outside around the door. So you can use these thermal cameras to see where you have lacking spaces in your facility, if you need to go back and put some more insulation in your attic. Thermal cameras are also a really great tool for finding where your new puppy has peed on the carpet. So lots of uses for these around the house and the farm. But when it comes to thermal cameras, you usually get what you pay for. There are a ton of different options and choices out there that you can pay for. We have the $120 option. These are all sows in a farrowing stall from a study we did. And at $120, you can tell it's a blob that could be a sow. At $600, definitely a sow in a farrowing stall. And then our $15,000 camera, you can count the hairs on that sow. So depending on what your needs are, lots of different options. I think a really nice economical one is the simple FLIR plugin. That's about $200. It works with any kind of cell phone. You can just pop it right in, and then you can point it around. And for the price point, you get relatively good accuracy and longevity. And then any photo you take is integrated right in with your phone. So when it comes to technologies, and there's lots of things to consider, but what are some practical standpoints that we need to keep in mind? The first is don't overcomplicate without good reason. You can get the fancy, tricked out version, but is that the version that you actually need? And if your basic four-wheeler can get you from point A to point B, you don't need to go with the Cadillac. Consider the long-term costs, as well as storage, maintenance, replacement costs of all these technologies that you're trying to purchase and buy. Now, there are some good reasons to overcomplicate a situation, and those are thinking about future expansions, if this technology is going to help you bridge a gap to another level that you're trying to get to. There are worthy value-added pieces, even though they may not jump back to ROI, especially thinking about welfare. And then job satisfaction. If it makes you happier to come to work every day, you may not be able to put a number on that, but sometimes that's worth it. On the hardware side, be sure you think about the placement of where that equipment is going to go. Where does it need to be? How's it going to be pointed? If it's a video camera, what are your workers going to be doing in that space that might inadvertently get videotaped? How close is that piece going to go to outlets? Do you have the outlets in your barn that you need in order to support the system? You don't want to install a whole brand new nice system and then the first time you open the door, rip down all the cords from the ceiling. So also think about where your inlets are and your heaters. You don't want to put your super expensive camera right in front of your blowers. And of course, in our pig barn environments, dust, moisture, gas, corrosion, common failures when we put these kinds of electrical things in pig barns. Cleaning and maintenance is a really critical piece of keeping these technology pieces up and running. You want to be sure that the technology is reachable or removable if it's a hardware piece, so you can actually get it down, so we can avoid situations like this where it's not getting cleaned on a regular basis. You want to be sure that if you do remove those sensors or cameras in between turns, how are you going to clean them and disinfect them? How often? And what are those chemicals going to look like? Is that going to affect the longevity of that hardware piece, especially if it's made of plastic? And if it's going to be removed out of your barn, it's going to have to sit somewhere while that barn dries. So do you have a dedicated place in your office or your pump house that you can put it while the barn is getting cleaned out in between turns? On the software side, how are you going to actually interact with this technology? Is it going to be mostly on your cell phone through an app? Is it an online organization? Do you have a dedicated tablet, computer, a screen on the wall in each of your rooms? How are you going to interact with this technology and who is going to be doing it? That also leads to thinking about accessibility features within your software. I thought I had good eyesight until I started working with 19-year-olds, so having that extra large font can be a real advantage. And if you have bilingual or non-native speakers, having an icon mode or even a Spanish mode on a lot of these technologies is a really great step to helping making them more inclusive and making them actually get used. If you want to have one user at a time, multiple users, real-time updates, and to tie into that password protection or user tracking, if you do have some really sensitive data on some of these software systems, you may want to limit the scope and ability that some user levels can see and access. And then I'd be remiss in a technology talk if I didn't have a slide in here on artificial intelligence. So thinking towards AI and machine learning, this is really a subset of software. Oftentimes we think about math and equations and how we get from Y to X, but in machine learning and AI is a more complicated process and sort of a black box approach usually of getting these answers. So the pro of using AI is that it gives us the enhanced ability to identify answers and diagnose patterns especially. So this can be a more complicated problem that gets simplified by this computer piece in between. And the advantage is that it still gets us to the right answer. If you think about flipping to the back of the math textbook, you may have the answers back there, and you can know what the answer is, and you know what the problem is, but you may not know how you got there when it comes to machine learning. So in some cases, this is fine, because you just want to know the answer. But in other cases, if you want to understand the why or how you got there, then perhaps another type of approach would be more appropriate. So in some cases, using an AI approach can limit the understanding of how you got there, but oftentimes if you can simplify that processing step, it can save you some computational time as well as energy usage to actually use these AI models. Now, when we're thinking about getting the data from one place to another inside your barn, there's a lot of different ways to get there, and the most common being either running a wire, some kind of cable, or trying to transmit it wirelessly. And here are some of the common wired and wireless options that you can have inside your facilities. Most often in barns, we're going to be transmitting via Ethernet cable, Cat6, or Power over Ethernet, PoE, when you can actually provide the electricity as well as the data back and forth between devices. So just depending on how far you need to go from your sensor to your central data point can help determine what type of technology you need. Now, of course, being in a swine barn that's filled with rebar, concrete, and metal, oftentimes our wireless systems are going to need a little more support, a few more repeaters in order to get our information between rooms or across systems. So just something to be cognizant of. And think about some local storage redundancies to make sure you don't have any data losses as you're trying to transmit data from the barn all the way back up to the office. Internet connectivity is going to be required for anything with a cloud or a third-party server service. And oftentimes, we're thinking about internet in terms of broadband or fiber, but you can also go to satellite internet for some applications, Starlink being a subset of satellite that actually orbits a little closer to the Earth, so you have less latency, a little bit faster response time there, or cellular service, depending on what's available in your area. If you look at the amount of data you're sending, how frequently you need to send it, and how often you're going to be accessing that data, that can help you decide what type of connectivity is going to be most cost effective. If you're sending real-time videos, then broadband or fiber is definitely going to be much more cost and speed effective than trying to do that over satellite. But if you're just trying to check on a sensor remotely, then perhaps a cellular or a satellite connection can save you some money and be just as good. So sometimes the sensors or technologies that you're buying will have a built-in product package or subscription fees that automatically include cellular service or connectivity, but it's important to actually have them come out and do a site survey to make sure you're not buying internet that's not actually available in your area. If we're collecting data, we want to be sure that we are keeping everything secure, depending on the type of information that you're collecting, especially if you're thinking images or audio. These can be pretty sensitive data streams because we'll also have our human workers in there. So you want to be sure that you are spending the time to make sure it's going through a reputable third party or some kind of structure to make sure you're going to be safe from ransomware, spyware, or data breaches. And then, of course, anytime you're collecting data, the time and money it takes to actually store that data can be pretty substantial depending on the type of information you're doing and how much of it you're keeping long-term versus cycling and turning over. So how can you set yourself and your technology up for success? First, you have to decide what success look like. Are you trying to get one more piglet per sow, or are you just trying to shorten your workload by 30 minutes every day? How much of your goals can be actually measured? You want to set some KPIs for yourself so that way you can determine if you're getting the return that you want on that particular technology. And again, some of those benefits look like time, cost, productivity, animal welfare, frustration, all really important things to consider when thinking about the technology success. Be sure that you give it the time, effort, and patience and courage that you need in order to learn how to use that technology. Don't be too afraid to click around and play with it. You spend a lot of money on this, and therefore the support company should be there to help you fix it if it breaks. And then, of course, don't be afraid to ask for help. I always tell my students, you want to productively struggle, because that's how you learn, but when your struggle stops being productive, be sure you ask for help, so that way you're not stuck looking for the any key when it doesn't exist. So there's a lot of commercial technologies out there, lots of different things you could be doing. The best technology for you and your system is the one that aligns with your goals, that provides value for you, but also fits within your budget and your facilities, unless you're looking to totally revamp. Be sure you have a long-term plan for this technology, and I'm talking 3, 5, 7 years, because you want to make sure that if you're going to buy it, what it's going to look like in phase 2, phase 3, and the pace of technology is always changing, so there may be a better model next year, and it might be better to hold off, just depending on what you're looking at. And then make sure that the people that are going to be using the technology, get some buy-in from them, and make sure that they're interested in it. And then, of course, don't be afraid to ask for help whenever you need it. So here's my contact info. Thanks so much for your time and attention today, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Dr. Leonard? Yes.
Thanks, Susan. Very nice presentation. Are you helping redesign any barns, design new barns or redesign old barns based on some of this technology? You mentioned outlets, Cat 5, Cat 6. I mean, are you helping some of these barn builders design farms in the future, I guess?
Sort of. So we are actually renovating all of our campus-based facilities. And so my biggest ask is just lots and lots of outlets, because there's a lot of technologies that we may want to put in different places. And so that's my number one wish, outlets. And then the ability to get internet here, there, yonder is also a really critical piece. And then looking at standardizing ceiling height or getting the ability to have different angles is also really valuable, because if you can have, in our facilities, we're, for multiple reasons, ending up with higher than normal ceilings, but then we can have half as many cameras because we can cover a greater area. So just thinking about some of those field of view things and how much flat ground each of those technologies can cover.
You went over a wide array of cameras. Have you ever done any research with the pig counters out there, and what are your thoughts on those?
Yes, we are next month getting a Romaine Smart counter. We tried at NC State to do some counting using ultra high frequency RFID tags, because the concept is you have essentially a 7-foot range on an RFID tag, and so we thought maybe we could count pigs with tags as they ran by. 80% good, so don't invest in the RFID counting technology, but we're looking into some of those counting technologies too, because I do believe that our counting is really labor intensive and not as accurate as it could be. So I think those are really exciting too. And I know the Romaine one at least also does weight estimation as they run by.
A trendy topic you briefly touched on was using cameras for weight estimates, maybe even lameness estimates. PIC talked a little bit about it earlier. Maybe even artificial intelligence, using technology to change the way we're feeding animals. What do you think that's going to be like in 5 years? Because right now I feel like it's really just emerging with people being able to do it. Where do you think we're going to be at that 5 years?
Yeah, I think you're right in that we are just past the bleeding edge of AI and starting to get into the cutting edge application-based things. I think that a lot of our industry is collecting good data, and then sometimes it just sits. And so my hope is that with the shortage of good analysts and humans who can do those sorts of things and tie them together, my hope is that the AI can jump in and help us with some of those decision-making things. And there's so many different moving parts in our industry, and the more we can tie those pieces together, I think that's where the magic is really going to happen. Oh, are we okay? I don't want to cut into the next time, so whenever we need to be done.